Welcome to the Resilient Butterfly Podcast. My goal is to share inspiring stories of healing and recovery through many diverse approaches and models. Our guests bring incredible lived experiences, insights, and/or professional expertise, each with their own unique path. While we highlight and celebrate these stories, our intention is to inform, inspire, and demonstrate resilience and creativity. This podcast does not endorse any one approach. We believe there is more than one way to heal, and we're here to showcase the resilience and possibilities that exist. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Resilient Butterfly. I'm your host today, Pam Feinberg-Rivkin, and I have two wonderful guests today that remarkable, both of them in their own way and connected for I don't know how many years. We'll figure that out. The first one I'm going to introduce is Dr. Jenny Frumer, just Jenny. She and I have known each other for 15, 16 years. She's a PhD, LCSW, MS in Education, and Chief Strategy Officer and Director for the Now for Holocaust Survivors program at Morse Life. Jenny is a global leader in supporting Holocaust survivors, advancing trauma-informed care, and building intergenerational connections. She also facilitates powerful in-person and virtual communities for second generation known as 2Gs, who carry the legacy of their parents' survival. She's much more than even that because of all of her own personal journey. And we're here with Carol Weinstein, who is a daughter of a Holocaust survivor whose story is both deeply personal and universally significant. Carol joins us today to honor her father, Joe Rubenfeld. May his memory be for a blessing, and to share the remarkable journey he endured, from surviving 8 concentration camps, including Auschwitz, to rebuilding a life rooted in kindness, generosity, forgiveness, and faith. I am so honored to have both of you here and to hear this wonderful story of Carol's father.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So before I start, I wanted to thank Jenny first, and of course Pam, but mostly Jenny because I'm honored that she actually asked me to be on the podcast and tell my dad's story. It's weird that she called me this week because my dad's 30th anniversary of his death is Saturday. And we are having what is called a Seudah Shlishit, which is an afternoon little dinner in his memory and in his temple, as my temple, Young Israel of Hollywood. And I am just honored to tell his story.
Wonderful.
So thank you. Thank you for having me.
30 years
since he passed. Yes. So, yeah.
Where does his story begin?
His story began in a small town in Poland. The name of the town, which I'm sure no one knows, is Ushtyki Doina.
Wow. No?
No. And it's amazing that I even say it correctly, but my father always told me that was the name. He had a brother and a sister. And his father actually was a lumber, very successful in Poland. When the Nazis came, he thought he was safe because a lot of the people in the town worked for him. There was a family who did harbor them, but when the Nazis came, they found out that if they did harbor Jews, that they would be executed. So unfortunately, they turned them in. They went from there to a ghetto. And from the ghetto, they stayed there. My father, unfortunately, got typhoid. And he separated from his family then because he didn't want his family to be killed. So he lived on the streets for many weeks. My dad
wonder he survived those weeks.
And it's interesting because my father didn't speak a lot about there's a lot of gaps in his story. But but he taught me a lot of lessons in life, a lot of lessons. And parts of them I will tell you, and some of them I'll tell you from my heart, because those are the lessons that I carry with me of his memory. They boarded, unfortunately, the train to their first concentration camp, and all 5 of them. And his father took him aside and said to him, of course not in English, in Yiddish, every day that we are separated, I want you to stand up, no matter how, if you get sick or if you're tired, at least once a day, and say these words: 213 Keep Street. And my father didn't speak English. And my father said, what is that? Now, back in those days, you respected your parents. And he said, never mind. He said, 213 Keep Street. And my father was very upset. And I remember him telling me this story. He only told my father. He didn't tell his sister or his brother. And my father said, why aren't you telling my brother and my sister? And he said, say those words. And I guess his father had a feeling, and he was the youngest. And I guess his father had the feeling that he was going to be the survivor.
Wow.
And he said, if we're separated, I want you to always raise your hand and volunteer. He said, but I don't know how to do anything. And he was 11 years old. But he looked stocky, and so he said yes. So my father went to the left, they went to the right, and he never saw them again. But he always believed that they were going to be alive.
How old were his siblings?
So his sister was the oldest, and I think she was 15. And his brother was 2 years older than him, so he was 13. And that was his first concentration camp. So his journey, and every day he said 213 Keep Street, and he never knew what. And he was sick, and he traveled a lot. And because he always volunteered, even though he wasn't a craftsman or didn't know, that's how he survived. Resilience was a huge thing with my dad. And unfortunately, his last concentration camp was Auschwitz. And he was very sick. But he kept on persevering. And every day, morning or night, he said 213 Keep Street. When the Americans came, of course.
How old was your dad when that happened?
I believe he was either 16 and a half or 17 at the time. And the Americans came and they looked at him. And I have a picture of him when he was freed from Auschwitz. So I don't know if you can
that
see
in
it.
The camera?
Can you see it? He never told me how he got this picture, nor did he ever tell me how he got this picture of Eisenhower coming into Auschwitz.
Wow.
So that's pretty amazing. And when the Americans approached him, he stood up like a soldier and he said 213 Keep Street. And he had no idea what he was saying. So I guess they wrote it down or they did their investigation. And 213 Keep Street was his father's family in New York.
Oh, wow.
And so they came to him because he was an orphan. So he was one of the first ones that was going to go into a DP camp, displaced persons camp. And he was, as you can see in the picture, he was very thin.
What
and
part of the family was it in New York?
So it was his father's siblings. And they didn't think that he survived, or the family did. And the Americans came and they said, That's your family. And he didn't even know he had family in New York. And but before he went to DP camp, which I don't really understand how he did this, he said, I want to go to New York, but I want to go back to the town to see if my family survived. So he went on a train and he met somebody before he boarded the train. And they said to him, you survived. And he said, yes, I'm going back to my town. And it just so happens that this person saw them going into, unfortunately, the gas chambers. Mm-hmm. So the mother and the sister. And he had heard that the father had perished as well. So he didn't go. And he went to New York and he met them. And my dad was a really interesting guy, not because he was my dad, but they met him at the boat and they wanted to send him to school. And he said, you gave me life. And he actually wrote them in dispersed camp. And it says on the back, 213 Keep Street. And I had it translated because it's in Yiddish. And he said, to my remembered forever family, to my most valuable and dearest, I must tell you that I am the only one who remained from my such a large family. And I thank you. And so he wrote that to them before he even met them. So he was so happy that they accepted him, and he didn't want to go to school. Mm. And he
had never been to school.
He had never been to school since 11. And so he was so. Every day he woke up, and I remember my cousins used to tell me, he used to say thank you to them. Mm. So I always asked my dad, like, Dad, how did you survive? He said, I survived, but I'm sorry that my family's not here. But when I was growing up, I always remembered those terrible, terrible dreams in the middle of the night. And he was such a positive person. But in the middle of the night, it used to come out. Mm. And my brother and I used to wake up in the morning and we never talked about it, ever. And it was like a wolf screaming. And I remember it to this day. And I always hugged him in the morning, but we never talked about it.
But did you realize it was from?
Yes, because I remember the words, and I remember, my parents used to speak Yiddish to each other, and he used to say, they're coming for me, they're coming for me. And it was like, and it sounded like a howling, and he had the same exact dream every night. And my friends used to want to sleep over, and I never wanted anyone to know that about my dad, because he was such a positive, influential person.
When he woke up in the morning, he didn't say anything.
Nothing.
Nothing. Your mom was able to carry through the night with him?
So my mom did carry through, but I noticed that as I got older, the dreams got more intense. Mm-hmm. And my father, unfortunately, tried to, in the middle of the night, because my mother, because they got worse. Mm-hmm. And I guess he harbored it so much. And one night, it was like almost 18, he tried to choke my mom. Oh. And he woke up. Mm-hmm. And he started, and I remember this, he started crying. And because I heard the crying, because I was in my room. And he went to a therapist, and he recognized that, it was the first time ever that he did that. And he felt so bad. So he said, my dreams are getting worse. And the therapist told me he had to go back. And so my parents went to Auschwitz.
Did he take anyone with him to help him process it?
He took my mom.
Besides your mom, no one?
No one else. And he knew what he was going to do, but he didn't tell her what he was going to do in Auschwitz. So he was freed from Auschwitz, but he was in Birkenau first and then in Auschwitz, or vice versa. I'm not sure. And he separated from the group. And my mother looked behind her and she didn't see my dad. And I remember before he left, I said, Dad, are you sure you want to do this? And he said, yes. And my mother was frantic. She, where's Joe? And he was wearing long sleeves, and my father had numbers. And he saw a guard, and my father touched the fence of Auschwitz. And the guard said to my dad in Polish, he said, you were here. And there's thousands of people that go through Auschwitz. And my father got really nervous. He goes, how do you know that? And he said, because every survivor does exactly what you did. And he didn't even realize that he did that, because then he looked at other people and no one else did that. And he said, I remember my bunk and you have to open it for me. And the guard said, I can't open it. He said, I survived here and I came back and you have to open up my bunk. And at this time, my mother was like nuts because she wasn't with the group. But where could you go?
Right.
So he went to and I asked him, he told us this, but he never told us what he did inside his bunk. This man opened it. He said I could get in a lot of trouble. And he opened it and he went into his bunk.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. Did he say, did the guard go in with him? Or
I don't know. He never told us. And then he met up with my mom, and my mother started, yelling at him and where were you,
Scary for her.
Yeah, it was very scary for her. And it just so happens when they met up, they were going down the block of where Mengele was doing his experiments. And he remembers, because he was an orphan, right? So older men used to protect him, and they said, never go down that street. And so when the group went down that street, he froze. And he said, I can't go down this street. But where Mengele was, it's like paper. But he couldn't go down that street. So he waited there, and they went, and he didn't. So then he went back to his town. And it was a small town.
How far away was Auschwitz from
It was far. It was very far. But they took a separate car, just my dad, my mom, and my dad. And they had a guide, because Polish at that time, you couldn't just go to Poland like you can now. And they had a guide. And so I would say like 4 hours or something. But he went, and they heard that he came. Now remember, townspeople turned them in. So the people that turned him in obviously had passed away because they were old, but the generation was there, and they met him. And he said, "You're here for revenge." And my father, he wasn't a revengeful person, because I remember I used to ask him, "Do you hate the Germans?" He said, "Carol," he said, "I forgive them." He said they were
probably why he was so positive in life.
Yes,
the forgiveness.
Yes, he was very forgiving in who he was as a person, and he really taught me that for forgiveness and seeing the good in people. And he said, "No, I'm here just to see the town." And he remembered his mother digging with her hands and putting all the silver in the ground. And he was hoping that it was going to be there. And my mother asked him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm looking for the Kiddush cups and the silver candelabra. My dad came back from Poland and he never had another dream.
That's amazing.
That was really amazing.
Really good therapist.
Yes, it was amazing. So
that's a little talking about a little bit of exposure therapy.
yes, very much.
And how much healing that it can occur as a result of that.
Yes, he really did, because it was so, I guess, surreal for him. And what he did in Auschwitz, we'll never know. But he had to go back and see. And he was such a positive person. You would never know that.
At what age did he go back? I keep asking you ages because
he was like, I want to say he was 58, something like that, because he died young. He died at 67, which is interesting. And then there's another story which also tells his personality. These men took him in and they said, tonight we're going to escape and you're going to escape with us. So it was the end of the war and it was Auschwitz. And he said, we're going to escape tonight. And he went with the men and they got caught. But the Germans used to play like games because they knew, I guess, that it was coming, but they used to play games. And so they said, so they put them in a dungeon. And my father started getting frostbite on his hands. And all the men said, what are you doing? He found cloth on the floor and he started making mittens. And he said, because we're going to be killed tomorrow. He says, yeah, but tonight we're not. And so I want to protect my hands so that if we do get out, and I could work tomorrow. So the Germans came the next day and they ran in all different directions. And he was hit by a bullet, but he thought he was dead. So he lied down. And he wasn't. He still had the graze marks.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
And he...
Did others in the group
killed? Two of the men were unfortunately killed. One of them... and he said, and the German said, if you survive, then you're just going to go walk back and nothing's going to happen. It was a game for them. And he laid there for a long time because he really thought he was dead because he felt blood and everything. But then he realized that he wasn't. So he walked out and then the other men just went their way. Many, many years later, my brother-in-law was sitting with this man and he was a survivor of Auschwitz as well. And he told my brother-in-law on the Sabbath, on Shabbos, he said there was this boy and he always had like a positive attitude. He always volunteered and he was an amazing, and this guy, unlike my dad, spoke a lot about, his time. And my brother-in-law said, well, what was his name? He goes, you wouldn't know his name. What's the difference? So he says his name was Yussel Rubenfeld. And I don't even know how he knew his name because most people didn't. They only knew by the numbers. Right. So he says, oh, my God. And it was my dad. And he was talking about my father, how and so after Shabbos, he called my father because we were religious and we didn't answer the phone until after sundown. And he told that he met this man who he was he captured and he survived this man, obviously. And they met in Chicago and everybody in the lobby, and they hugged each other and they hadn't seen each other. He didn't know he survived. He didn't know because people also died in the displaced persons camp. And he was so young. And they hugged each other like crazy. And my mother and I were crying. It was unbelievable. And this man was much older than my dad, much older, which was unbelievable.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It was a crazy story.
And where were you at the time, in New York?
So we were in New York, but we went to a wedding in Chicago. So we all were there, and this man was from Chicago. That was an amazing story. So my father was the candy man in Temple, and he had a little, and everyone knew he was a Holocaust survivor because he used to wear short sleeves, and they used to ask him about his numbers, and he said, I was in concentration camp, and I survived. And he became the candy man in Temple. And he always had a little basket, and he always said to the children, because his whole life he always said, thank you. Thank you. And I guess that's something that I learned from him. And he said, no, take the candy. He says, you have to say thank you. So he went to the bathroom, and it was Rosh Hashanah. And he was coming out of the bathroom, and this man was coming in. And they looked at each other, and they started crying and hugging in the bathroom. And there were little children in the bathroom. And they ran up to where the rabbi was. They go, quick, Rabbi, something's the matter with the candy man. He's crying with this man, and we don't know the man. Well, P.S., they were in Auschwitz together, but they never saw each other again. Afterwards, they both survived, and they hadn't seen each other for, 20 years. It was very, very emotional. And when my father got sick, that's when he started getting talking about. And
So we didn't really tell a lot of stories before he got sick?
No, not at all. And he saw Schindler's List, and he was diagnosed with cancer at the time. And he said, and every year, because of my dad, I headed the Holocaust program at the temple every year. And he never spoke. And he watched this, and that was his first concentration camp, the beginning of Schindler's List. And so he said he remembered that guy, the commandant, standing and just doing target practice, and he remembered him. And then all of a sudden he said to me, I think I want to speak, because he knew that he didn't have a lot of time, unfortunately. He had very aggressive cancer, and he only survived 18 months. And he did through the Shoah, but he really didn't tell his story. It was almost like a history lesson. He didn't tell his personal story. In the middle, he cried, and it was very sad because you realized that he couldn't tell his story.
How was he when he told the story to you?
He didn't really ever tell me the story. He just told me bits and pieces. And this is all I know from him.
Well, I think that's quite a bit from what I understand.
Yeah, but not his story of, I used to ask him, well, what did you do in concentration camp? And he never told me. Never.
Not the details.
Not the details. But when he was dying, he wanted to see the rabbi. And this was the day before he died. And he wanted me to leave the room. And I was already married, and I had children. And I said, no, Dad, I'll stay. Because I took off from work because I knew he was, it was imminent. And I waited outside, and he closed the door, the rabbi. And the rabbi, I'm sorry, it's very emotional, this part. He told the rabbi that he was happy that he was dying. And he harbored it this whole time. And the rabbi said, Joe, you're such a good person. He had a business. And he said, yes. He said, but I always had guilt of thank you. I always had guilt of surviving. And now I'm dying young. He was 67, and he was in pain. And he felt that it was his time, And he didn't know why God gave him so many wonderful years because he was the only survivor. And he felt that he asked God all the time, why was he the only person who survived? And God never answered him. And he told the rabbi, and the rabbi was so upset. He goes, Joe, you were such a good person. He says, I was, but why was I the only survivor?
Nobody will know, right?
No one will know.
I mean, there's so many different stories of survivor.
Right. Yeah.
And look at all the good that he gave.
Yes, he did.
And you say you have a brother, right?
I have a brother.
To carry on the generations and the information and the stories.
Yes. And I do tell my grandchildren, and and my kids knew him for a short time, but he wasn't here for other things. Many years later, I got a dog. That's.
I was waiting for this story.
Yeah. So I got a dog, and because my older son was going to college, and my younger son was going to miss him a lot. So everyone said, Carol, get a dog. I said, I work 12 hours a day. Are you kidding? So I said, okay, got a dog. So in those days, they didn't put a chip in. They branded the dog with numbers on their stomach.
What?
Yes. So that's what they did back in the day, the Humane Society, because I rescued the dog.
Right.
So I brought home the dog, and the dog was laying on his back. Mm-hmm. And my mother started screaming. And she goes, oh, my God, oh, my God. I said, oh, this was a great idea to get this dog, right? So, and the kids came in. They go, Grandma, what's the matter? What's the matter? So my father was from Auschwitz, and he had 5 numbers. And he had a letter on his arm. And every single number, 5 numbers on the dog's stomach, and the A for Auschwitz were on the dog's stomach. And I didn't name the dog.
Wow.
And
branded.
And branded. And I didn't name the dog, and the dog's name was Jojo. My dad's name was Joe.
Unbelievable. Wow.
I knew that you would, yeah.
I'm a dog lover for anybody that doesn't know. So,
yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine both dogs and humans being branded, but that is amazing.
Isn't that amazing? And so that's why my mother
Anybody
was
that
screaming.
hears the story can't stop the tears, right?
Right. Yeah. Yes.
I mean, geez.
So I'm blessed to teach Holocaust to 6th, 7th, and 8th graders as a volunteer. Because when my dad was dying, I always promised him that I would tell the stories that I knew, but mostly about him, his resilience, his love. And I tell that story. And the kids are just like, what?
Yeah.
But
Do you still have Jojo?
No, he passed, but he was 17 when he passed. So that was, but the funny part of the story, so I apologize to make you cry, but the funny part of the story is my
There's no
mother
apology here, by the way, but go ahead.
My mother talked to that dog like she talked to my father. She's go, Joe, I'll be right back, Joe. And I go, Ma, it's like not Dad. But I lit candles I light candles every Friday night. And I didn't see the dog. And it was the first Friday, and I don't know how, the dog was sitting near the candles. Now, how would the dog know that? So I went to a rabbi, because I'm very spiritual. And I said, Rabbi, I said, okay. And I told him this story. He goes, come on, Carol, really? I go, no, you're going to see Jojo. Yes, all the numbers, not extra numbers, just the 5 and the A. So he goes, we don't believe in that, but we can believe that your father...
That meaning reincarnation.
Yes, reincarnation. We don't believe in reincarnation as Orthodox Jews, but it is a sign that your dad's always with you.
It's an abrupt sign.
Yes.
It's like they're so amazing.
Yes.
Wow. And your mother, did she find comfort?
Yes,
Obviously.
she did. She did find comfort. And so this was a picture, the last picture, of my dad when he was at the Shoah Foundation telling his story. And in the little basket, and he had already passed by then, in the little basket is my nephew, who's named after Joe, and his name is Joe Rubenfeld.
Oh, nice. Beautiful story.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for allowing me to.
I know that so many people will continue to share this story for, it's documented.
Yes.
Continued to be. So, Carol, I know that you want to read a poem that your granddaughter wrote about your father. And
Yes.
it's very special, and I want you to have that time.
Okay. Thank you. So my granddaughter, I didn't know that my grandkids listen to me because I do tell them a lot of stories. And now that they're older, I do tell them stories about my father. So my granddaughter Rivka, who is named after my father's sister, and this is the picture right before they were taken by the Nazis. This was the last picture that I have of his parents, and I was named after my father's mother, and his father, his brother, and my father is right there. And he was the youngest, even though he doesn't look the youngest. So, and my granddaughter Rivka is named after my father's sister. And the reason why my son Kobe named after Rivka, because Rivka never had children. She died. And in the Jewish faith, we, if you're Ashkenaz from Eastern Europe, we name after people that are not with us anymore. And so Rivka never had children. So that's why my son named his daughter Rivka. And Rivka wrote this, and she was 13. I wish I could have known him, all he lost. A survivor was born, but what did it cost? I know now what it means. It's not just a story passed through genes. He lived, he survived, but I know now that he died inside. I never met him, I wish I had, but I know now the past he dragged. I wish I could have heard the stories he told in the darkest times when the nights were cold. I would do anything for one conversation to thank him for surviving for our nation. Words would come out. I would listen. Something from the heart, not written. They're not just stories. They were his life. The words cut through like a knife. I'll repeat it again. Something that was unfair. God took him away without a care. I wish I could witness his smile and laugh, past the stories and the photographs. But I know now the life he lost, what could have been and what it cost. Even though it's not fair, his story, I promise, will be shared. In my dad's memory, may his neshama, his soul, be a blessed memory.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
I should have started with you, Jenny. I'm sorry.
No apologies here.
Oh, okay, Jenny.
Yeah. Hi.
How did you start working with Holocaust survivors in 2G, 3G, which is second generation, third generation? And what are some of the educational and supportive components of what you do?
I think I have always known about the Holocaust. I was born in Zimbabwe, which is where my colonial British accent's from, and then grew up in South Africa and went to Jewish day school and were around Holocaust survivors pretty much as far back as I can ever remember. People with tattoos on their arms, people speaking Yiddish and Polish and Hungarian, and a lot of Lithuanians landed up in South Africa in particular.
Is that particularly why most South Africans are actually Orthodox as well? Is that
I don't know that most are. I grew up very unorthodox, but with a lot of what we call Yiddishkeit.
Yeah.
You know, the cultural pieces of being Jewish and the knowledge of the Holocaust. My social work background is such that I've always worked with older adults, even though I worked with children very early on in my career. So working with older adults, particularly here in Florida, many of them were in fact Holocaust survivors. And so as the retired CEO of Elpert Jewish Family and Children's Service, where I was for 32 years, we used to bring Holocaust survivors to schools. But of course now Holocaust survivors are really much older. And even though they still want to continue talking to students, it's sort of part of their legacy and they feel very strongly about it, there are days they don't feel so good.
Yeah.
And so it's really much harder for them to get to schools, even with transportation and everything that goes with it. And then during the pandemic, we Zoomed with a lot of schools and Holocaust survivors, but they really are older. And we're losing many every day.
Do you know who would be the age of the youngest?
The youngest survivor are considered to be child survivors or hidden children, and they're in their 80s. So they were really young during the Holocaust.
How are you going to continue education for those that are no longer surviving?
So I'm really pleased you asked. Carol spoke about being a volunteer. We are a program which is more like an initiative. It's the only one of its kind. It's the Holocaust Learning Experience. And we focus on working with students 5th grade through 12th grade on courage and resilience and moral clarity, essentially building better people through the lens of history using the Holocaust as a way of really talking about what happens when hate is left unchecked. And so having an ambassador like Carol be able to talk directly with students as a child of Holocaust survivors, as you mentioned, 2 Gs, it's so very, very important. And those who are grandchildren of Holocaust survivors are now also sort of mobilizing themselves to keep their grandparents' stories alive as the grandchildren or 3 Gs of Holocaust survivors. So maintaining that kind of legacy becomes really, really critical, really very, very important. But it's really from the perspective of resilience, and I know you understand that.
Yes.
It's talking about what happened and the reality of what happened, but how so many survivors, they may have had nightmares, they may have had moments in time where they were really impacted by their experience and their trauma, but how we use the word Hebrew, kadima, one foot in front of the other. It was all about family. It was all about making sure that their survival had meaning. Not to say that many Holocaust survivors haven't questioned why they survived, and finding that meaning in being able to have family that they can pass on their resilience to, as well as some of their vulnerabilities, because we know and we talk about this in gatherings with 2 Gs, children of Holocaust survivors, how it's like a 2-sided coin. There's the vulnerability and then there's resilience.
Sure.
And those vulnerabilities may impact how we live. And having been around so many Holocaust survivors and having family members who were survivors, and then also sort of growing up in the countries that I grew up in, you're always looking behind you. You always make sure you know where the exits are in any situation, any building that you're in. You always have this proverbial, metaphorical bag packed. You would never imagine not having a passport. It's all of those kinds of things. And it's really interesting because you ask how I got involved. I think it's these commonalities amongst the intergenerational aspect of trauma that is so important for people to feel that they don't have to constantly explain themselves to someone else.
Well, we have had to have survivors. Your dad was one of them, but to have survivors to tell the story. Because if there weren't survivors, the story would die at some point because, there's people still that don't even believe that it exists or existed.
Well, that picture of Eisenhower is so important because General Eisenhower, upon liberation, made statements like he ordered all of his photographers and all of his media people to film everything because he apparently said at some point in time, people will not believe this happened. And that is when they walked into the camps and liberated the camps, and there were people who were really sick who weren't able to go on death marches. There were corpses and bodies, and I don't have to get more graphic, but he said, we've got to document this because at some point no one will believe it. And then having the stories of Holocaust survivors has been very, very important and very meaningful to me personally and as an educational tool. And what is unique about the Holocaust learning experience is that we have pre-packaged, pre-recorded lessons for teachers. Teachers want to teach the Holocaust. They want better people in their classrooms, more respectful people, people who are not haters and bias and prejudice. But they're so uncomfortable with the material and they don't know how to bring it into the classrooms, even when there's an opportunity to do that. So this is why this program is so unique, because it has a mini documentary about a topic, Holocaust survivor giving testimony, and the teacher can comfortably bring this into the classroom for students.
How widespread is this learning experience in the schools?
We are, which dates it, of course, because we're constantly growing very rapidly. But to date, we are in 42 of the 67 school districts in Florida, and we're in 10 other states, soon to be 13. And so it's in 18 months, just less than 2 years, we have grown.
That's incredible.
Really fast.
And to get it into every state would be amazing, right?
Yes, ideally. And also there's been some international interest in it as well. It's currently in 5 languages. So we have 40 lessons in the catalog and an opportunity for a teacher to fit this into any kind of curriculum. So it can be global history, civics. We have arts and language, because every lesson there's some kind of artistic or poetry, something that can be used. There are standards for resilience in many states, and so it fits into the resilience curriculum. And also these 5 languages, and we can add as many languages as are needed depending on the different populations within.
What are the languages currently?
Currently, it's obviously English for ESL, Russian, Portuguese. There's a large Portuguese community in Southeast Florida. Russian. There's a large Ukrainian population up in northern Florida, and Creole and Spanish.
Very nice. So tell the listeners how they may be able to get into the program, get more information on the program, the monthly meetings that you have. How can they access those?
Yeah. So you're always able to contact the Holocaust Learning Experience. The easiest way to do that is holocaustlearningexperience.org.
Very nice. And they can learn about anything and everything.
Yes.
Well, thank you, ladies. I so much appreciate.
Thank you.
The only picture you didn't bring is your dog.
Yes, I did not. I did not. I should have. I should have. Yes.
But thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I hope to get this out to many, many people.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining the conversation today. If you are seeking help for yourself or a loved one, please reach out to our Feinberg Consulting team at 248-538-5425. That's 248-538-5425. And check out our website at feinbergcare.com. I'm grateful for our guests and all who have joined us today. Make sure you follow us on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to podcasts.